Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Thanks for listening to the show. Join your hosts, Bill Alvstad and Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, hi, Seahawks fans. Welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers here to talk Seahawks football. We're going to recap the 2024 NFL draft held this past weekend. We're also going to talk about some undrafted rookie free agent signings and some camp invites, maybe take a look overall at the roster, just kind of see where we're at. Lots of fun stuff to talk about. Keith, how you doing? How was your weekend? How was the draft for you?
I'm doing good. The weekend was way too short and the draft started out well. And let's face it, Saturday was kind of depressing.
Yeah, a little bit. You know, it's one of those things where, and you too, dude, you've been around for a while. You've seen these things for like the last 30 years. For me, I'm getting darn close to 40 years following the draft really, really closely year in, year out. I've seen enough of these things to know that even if you don't know or haven't heard of or studied the players, especially on day three, it doesn't mean they're necessarily bad or bad picks or reaches or whatever. And sometimes they turn out, sometimes they don't. It's one of those things where you can have studied all of these players, and based on your draft boards or wherever you mock them, typically, if they don't fall in that range, they're either reaches or you got great value.
So I'm going to never know until they get out on the field whether that's true or not. People tend to know the top of the draft pretty well, and as you get lower, and you and I are both like that. We both don't know the lower part as well. There are some people that I did scout that I did have what I thought were well-formed opinions on that the team clearly disagreed with me. And so we'll wait and see whether it works out or not. But I was disappointed with some of the picks they made.
Yeah, I was disappointed, especially I think with Tyrese Knight at the linebacker spot after they traded back in the fourth round to 118. I thought, based on almost everything that I can find and research in multiple sites, he was valued in the 6th, 7th round. We chose him in the 4th round. To me, that's the one that kind of sticks out the most. Everything else you can kind of understand and so forth. Now, with that said, he could end up being the best player in the draft. You just don't know these things. It's kind of crazy. Now, he's got all the athletic attributes that you're looking for, all that kind of stuff. There were other players ranked ahead of him. There were other players at different position groups that maybe should have been ranked higher and so forth. So you can make all sorts of arguments about his value there at that spot. But now that he's on the team, I'm going to support him. I'm looking forward to seeing what he brings to the table. And you know what? Here's the deal. Somebody went to the table for that kid and pounded on the table for him. And I have to give Mike McDonald the benefit of the doubt. He coached linebackers for 9 out of the past 10 years. The other time he was a tight ends coach or a special teams coach or something like that. He knows linebackers. Like, that's his thing. And if they chose him, they did it for a reason. Like, there were other linebackers on the board. Trotter comes to mind, a few others. Gray. And I looked at him because he was a 30 visit guy, and otherwise he would have been a mystery, complete mystery in this draft for me, because I really didn't go that deep. I mean, we go about 200, 225, 250 players deep, and sometimes he was right on that periphery there as far as the big boards that I was looking at.
Yeah, which puts him down right at the end of the draft as far as on draft boards.
Free agent, right?
And not someone you're going to take in the 4th round.
Right, but it doesn't mean he's not worth a 4th round pick. It just means that all the evaluators pre-draft had him ranked lower, and there's a reason why they took him. And I'm looking forward to finding out why, because usually there's a reason. Like there's a reason why this guy was almost a top 100 pick, and I kind of need to figure that out. before I completely pass judgment on that.
But sometimes that reason is just because some scout, some evaluator for a team really screwed up. Like, we can't just entirely give and say, oh, because a GM drafted him, they must be good. Because we've seen in the draft, GMs draft a lot of players that aren't good.
Oh yeah, and on the Seahawks, obviously. I mean, we drafted a few kids from Colorado, in the past, a couple of safeties, corners, and so forth. Those guys just didn't work out. It's just what it is. So let's talk about what did work right off the bat. I thought the first pick, the way that the draft fell, Keith, which was just completely unusual. I think there was 14. The first 14 picks were offensive picks. The 15th pick was Latu right before Seattle, and then Seattle chose Murphy at 16. Didn't have to move around. They felt like they didn't need to drop back or didn't want to drop back. They had 4 offers on the table, according to John Schneider. Byron Murphy was sitting there. They had him as their highest rated defensive player in this draft. If you take a look at Latu, maybe they had him cleared or not cleared medically. We don't know, but they went with Byron Murphy as Latu was off the board. And I think they would have gone with, for him anyway. And it was great value at that spot. And I'm really happy with this pick, Keith, because, as we've talked about many, many, many times, defensive tackle, defensive lineman, this high just hasn't happened for Seattle. And we've just kind of been saying we need guys like that in the trenches on this team to really make this defense work. And this is a guy that really does give that an opportunity to be successful. And you take a look at him at the University of Texas, he was playing nose tackle, even though they had Devondre Sweat there. Because he was just better at it.
He would play nose tackle in the nickel when Sweat would come off the field. But in the base defense, Sweat played the nose and Murphy played the 3. And that might be how they use him in this, is let, have him line up in the 3, and then, in the nickel, he can line up anywhere and get after the quarterback. Cause this is a guy that his pass rush win rate in college was insanely high. So
yeah, super athletic, and just kind of a tenacious, violent, strong human. Like his lower half, Keith. I mean, just impressive.
It's
you go
fast.
Look at him; he just didn't have any bad weight on him.
He's so quick.
Yeah.
So people have been comparing him to Aaron Donald, I think, because of the height, and
the playing style.
And a little bit. I don't think of him as like an Aaron Donald. I went back and relooked at some stuff, and the guy he reminds me of is Warren Sapp. Which that is not a knock on anybody, because Warren Sapp's like a Hall of Famer. But Warren Sapp lived in the backfield. He was quick. He got into holes faster than, the guards could get out of their stance, which made him a great pass rusher on the interior. And he was a run stuffer simply because if you're in the backfield, you're disrupting what the team's doing, and their guys aren't being able to get to their spots and wall people off. So, I honestly, that's kind of where I'm leaning with him. I mean, this is a really good player.
Really good player, and I think that his best football is ahead of him.
Yeah.
In 2022, he played in 12 games, took 358 snaps, had 22 tackles, 7 assists, 18 stops. As a pass rusher, he had 19 total pressures, 16 hurries, 2 quarterback hits, and a sack. But in 2023, the guy just exploded. About 40 more snaps total, but he had 13 tackles, 5 assists, 19 stops. As a pass rusher, he had 40 pressures, including 30 quarterback hurries, 4 hits, 6 sacks on the year. Great in stopping the run, setting the edges and so forth. He's on Bruce Feldman's freak list, 18th overall, because he's just so strong. It just the strength alone put him in that list. It's kind of crazy. So when you take a look at him too, as a human being, he's just a brick. Like his lower half is so thick and muscular. And then his hands are just, explosive and violent. He's just kind of a violent guy. He doesn't care who's in front of him. He just kind of swipes him away out of the way. It's pretty fun to watch. Yeah. And I'm thrilled, really, because that's exactly what we needed. Now, would it have been better if it was a defensive tackle, like a true defensive nose tackle? Yeah, I would love to have one of those on my team.
Yeah, but there wasn't one in this draft other than his teammate Trevondre Sweat, who
right. He went really
limited.
Early.
He's limited in as a player. He's only a run stuffer, and there's some character concerns there.
Right.
So,
right. Yeah, and he went in the 30s, so
right in the early in the second round.
Right.
It's crazy.
So, we can keep talking about this guy. We'll have plenty of time to talk about all these guys. But let's kind of make our way through the list. Now, Seattle stood pat. We had a pick 381 overall. There were a lot of talk, at least amongst us, and many others, that Seattle would try to get into that spot in between 81 and 16 somewhere to find a guy.
They tried like crazy too. I read a report that they were working the phones and trying to get up into the second half of the second round. Constantly.
For what player or what kind of player they were looking for?
No, they didn't say any of that, but they just said that they were trying and just never could make it happen. My guess is
targeting.
My guess would be Junior Colston would be the guy, just because linebacker was such a need, but I don't know. I can't tell you as far as that goes, because they'll never say.
Right. So all things considered, I thought it worked out fabulously. We stuck at 81. We took another position of need and also best player available on the board. At least I believe so. By all accounts, everything that I'm reading and looking at, people that I value opinions on offensive linemen, including yourself, had this guy rated as the first or second true guard prospect in this draft. If you're not talking about conversion guys that are played tackle in college, going to convert.
I think I think he's the best. He's the best guy who played guard in college and will play guard in the NFL.
Yeah. And I had him in, my big board around 50, between 50 and 60. And he went 81. That's pretty decent value. So
good player.
A couple of the drawbacks are he just turned 24, so he's a little older prospect, stayed in school, was at school for 6 years, but didn't play in 2 of those. He had a redshirt freshman year, in 2018, and in 2020, the school that he went to, Connecticut, canceled the season because of COVID. Dane Brugler's got him ranked as the 47th best overall player, regardless of position. Snyder called him classy and nasty, which is perfect.
Nasty is a good description for his tape. This is a guy that he doesn't just block to the whistle. Like, I've seen his teammates like pull him off guys.
Nice.
He's got that mean streak that you want in an offensive lineman. Great skill. His punch is good. His balance is there. He doesn't get out over his toes too far. Mirrors well. Is surprisingly good out in space, trying to find linebackers to block if that's what he ends up doing. Like it. There's not a lot of drawbacks with this guy other than his age. And I don't know. Like I said, I think he's the best true guard in the draft. Like, now there's going to be other people that are going to be better guards. Whether, if Fashanu doesn't end up at tackle, if he ends up at guard, I'm sure he'll be like a Pro Bowler. And then guys like Graham Barton and those guys, that are tackle conversions, there's a reason why they went before him. But as far as pure true guards, I mean, even Cooper Beebe, who went ahead of him, is a center, not a guard.
Yes. Yeah. He went to Dallas. Yeah.
Yep.
Dallas
and he
was going to play him at center.
Yeah, which they should, because
Christian
he's
Haynes could play center. He took some center snaps at the Senior Bowl, but he played like in 49 games and like started all of them at right guard. Which leads me to my next question, Keith. When you take a look at our roster and you take a look at the guard position, and Anthony Bradford started 10 games over there last year, and then you've got Laken Tomlinson, who was just signed to a pretty decent deal, friendly deal though.
Very friendly.
Start at left guard. So it seems like the guard spots, while we needed a guard and a true upgrade, does he immediately get penciled in? I don't want to say penciled in, but kind of in the competition over there with Anthony Bradford, or does he try to move around a little bit, or do they move Anthony Bradford around a little bit?
I think there's a 3-man competition for 2 spots, and they'll worry about getting the best 2 guys on the field, and right and left doesn't matter that much. I mean, Bradford, I would prefer on the right side. But the other 2 guys can play on the left.
Christian Haynes actually
he profiles
better as a left guard to me.
Yeah, he does. His experience is on the right side. In the end, it really doesn't matter. Guard is not like tackle. There's very slight differences between right and left in their assignments and that kind of stuff. Most players, you can't tell the difference when they move from one to the other. You don't see any change in their play quality. The guard's just not the same as tackle in terms of, right and left side being that big of a deal. So I don't think it matters. I just really don't. I just think that they have 3 guys competing for 2 spots, and go with it. And honestly, if Oluwatimi doesn't step up and show that he can start at center, then maybe those 3 guys end up in all 3 interior spots, and you end up with the rookie right there playing center. So it's a possibility.
We've got some depth now. I mean, you take a look at the top, they're going to play the top 5 offensive linemen, give or take.
Mm-hmm.
Charles Cross, Abraham Lucas, George Fance there now, Anthony Bradford, Laken Tomlinson, Christian Haynes, and Oluwatimi. That's 6.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's 7.
Somebody's going to sit. Or 6 or 7, yeah.
Yeah,
that maybe sits. Maybe Laken Tomlinson sits. I don't know.
My guess is Laken Tomlinson starts the year. All this is assuming everyone's healthy at left guard, and then whoever starts at right guard is whoever wins that competition. But that it's not very long before we see whoever lost that competition getting playing time.
So, how do you think Seattle did at that pick? They on the board still was Jaden Hicks, Cameron Kitchens, Malik Mustafa at the safety position, and then you've got Peyton Wilson, Tommy Eichenberg, Cedric Gray were available at linebacker, certainly positions of need. I would certainly argue, though, that the Seahawks made the right decision. I was just curious as to how you.
I really like that pick. To me, that was a great pick. I'm not a Cameron Kitchens guy. I'm not a Luke McCaffrey guy. So I think that passing on them, I'm not worried about. Maybe a guy like Adisa Isaac, I would have thought about, but even that, honestly, they needed some stability on the interior offensive line. That's all we've talked about this entire time. And
now we're really strong at the position, which is really good. So after the pick number 81, we go into day 3 of the draft.
Oh,
Seattle.
Why did they pass on that guy?
Yeah, I lost you for a while. I'm not sure if it recorded or not, Keith. So we'll see. What did
anyways,
I was
just saying that there was none of these guys that I was like, oh, why did we, pick Haynes over him? There isn't any of them.
Right.
It's a good pick and
one of the best values I thought in the entire draft.
It really was. And it was also, the last great Seattle pick in this draft.
Yeah. And like I was just saying, now we approach the offensive line as a position of strength.
Mm-hmm.
We've got 7 guys that you could easily say that were our starter level. You couldn't have said that last year. So that's good. Okay. So here's where the draft gets kind of squirrely. So Seattle was at 102. They trade back. I thought they got good value on the trade. I didn't mind the trade at all. Okay. So they get to 118 and there's just, there's a lot of nice players on the board. I thought Seattle reached. Let's just be honest. I thought this guy could have been a fringy 5th round, maybe 6th round guy. And I thought at 118, they get the guy that's the best guy on their board, regardless of position or whatever. And that's the way they kind of start drafting at this point, is best player available. And Tyrese Knight's name came up, and I was just like, here we go. I don't know what the pressing urgency was to pull him off the board unless the league's GMs saw him completely different and Schneider got wind of that he was going to go in the next 3 picks or 15 picks, and he wasn't going to be able to get him unless he did that. Otherwise, they probably could have got him at 179, and had some other priority guys to choose from at 118. That's just me. I could be completely wrong. I would love to hear the take coming out from like Mike McDonald specifically on him, because he's a linebacker guy. He knows this guy.
When they moved down, they missed out on Cedric Gray, who is the better prospect in my opinion.
Yeah.
And one, so he got taken 106, and then they're in the second and at the end of the round 3, there were a bunch of linebackers that went, and so it's like, okay, where are you going to get your linebacker? Because this is a position Seattle had to get a player. I mean, they've got what they need as far as like players on the roster, but they're on 1-year deals. Neither of them is a long-term solution to anything. They really needed a linebacker in this draft. Unfortunately, they couldn't get up into the second round where they wanted. I think they wanted Junior Colston. And all, there were some other things, and they really got down to a point where what was left at linebacker specifically. And I think that was was really the telling point. They felt like there wasn't anything left at that particular position, and it was either take this guy now or miss out, and not have that guy on the roster at all. I'm not convinced that this guy is that guy. I would have preferred Jeremiah Trotter Jr., who wasn't taken for like a whole round later. But I know Trotter can pass or can
cover.
Yeah. Right. And that's so important in McDonald's defense, is having the linebackers that can cover. And Trotter can do that. But Trotter's also not as athletic as some of the other guys. And I mean, that's really, it came down to your choice of, do you want a guy who's really polished, who's great in coverage, or do you want a guy who racks up tackles like no one else, is great at attacking downhill and getting to the line of scrimmage to make plays, and then you have to take them off the field in the nickel? Like, they're the player that comes off the field, the one middle linebacker that doesn't stay.
And just to be clear too, he's probably more of a will guy. He's probably a Jerome Baker backup, this year. Dodson's going to play in the middle. And I like the upside, Keith. I really do. If you go look at his profile, and he played at the Senior Bowl. I know Jim Nagy's really close with Schneider. I'm sure that he's got some input there as well. I think they like the physical nature of him, the explosive player that he can be, and showed. His 10-yard split was 1.54, which is highly unusual for that size.
For a guy that size, it is.
Yeah, and his wingspan is nearly 80 and a half inches, but there's no other special attributes. He ran a 4.63, which is okay straight line speed, plenty to get sideline to sideline where he needs to be. There's no other explosive traits, though, there's as far as the physical profile is concerned. And so you're looking at tape there, and there is some things that are fun. And you mentioned it. Really, he's a tackling machine. He's a physical guy. He's a run and chase guy.
And comes up into the hole really well. Makes a lot of tackles, just a lot of tackles, and makes a lot of tackles at the line of scrimmage or within 1 yard of it, which is great. You want that. You need that. You want guys that can come forward and make tackles, not be make a ton of tackles 6 yards downfield. But his tape in coverage is, do you remember when,
Cody Barton?
No, actually not even Cody Barton. I was going to say when Norton would drop Puna Ford into coverage, which is like the dumbest thing ever. He's a nose tackle.
Insert 300-pound lineman. Right.
Yeah. It felt, there's a couple of, like, there's not just a couple, there's some plays in Knight's tape that looks like Puna Ford in coverage,
where he's just twisting and spinning in space.
Yeah. And has
really
no idea
what
he's doing and not covering anyone.
I'm not so concerned about that, because I think they can teach him up. I really do. I mean, the guy seems to be a very smart kid. They like that sort of upside, natural leader. I'm just really curious as to why I heard your reasoning too about pulling the trigger at this stage of the draft and so forth as linebackers were coming off the board.
I just don't see other linebackers that are sitting there available, because other than Trotter, Trotter was the one guy that
and it was in a bad class overall.
Yeah.
So, maybe they just got a guy that had a lot of upside that could play special teams this year, and they'll go attack the position next year. I mean, there's always that. It's like, well, we missed out this year. Let's fill these spots. Let's get a guy that can come in if needed, but can also play special teams really well for us. And we'll just figure this out next year. Or we'll get a guy out of training camp or a vet guy, maybe, if Tyrese Knight doesn't show in camp. So I'm not too worried about it. I just hate wasting a pick. So as long as he's got some upside and can come in and has this year where he figures it out, comes in next year, he's ready to go, I'm good, but I don't want to harp too much on him until I actually see him, on the field. The next pick I liked, AJ Barner, tight end, Michigan. He's got the Michigan connection with Mike McDonald, with our special teams coordinator. He had over 550 special team snaps in college. That's why they got him, in addition to his ability to block and some upside on the pass catching. I'll be honest, he's got kind of the full package. He's just undeveloped, a little bit underutilized at Michigan in the passing game. He's definitely kind of a fierce competitor guy as a run blocker. And, at that point in the draft, I'm totally fine with that pick.
Yeah, I didn't like the pick when it first happened. I went back and looked, and I'm like, okay, I can sell myself on this really easy. Now, Cade Stover was still there at the same position. He went 2 picks later. And
Cade Stover has a little bit more refined receiving game.
He does, and that's why I thought Stover was the better prospect. But when it comes down to it, who's the better blocker of the two? That would be Barner. And who is he replacing? That would be Will Disley, one of the best blocking tight ends in the NFL. And I was really able to sell myself on this pick as a good one. The difference between him and Stowe in overall talent, I'm not that concerned about. They chose to go for a guy who's got better blocking skills and less receiving. And that just shows you, they valued the toughness and the blocking and that kind of stuff more. And okay,
I think yes, they went and got their kind of player that they would like to have on their team, like a gritty, competitive guy who's willing to stick his nose in and get the job done. And that's Barner. It just is. He's kind of a work lunch pail guy, which is totally fine. You need those guys on your team. He does give you some upside on the passing, though. I mean, he really does look good when he is receiving. He just doesn't have a lot of that on tape. I mean, they had like 20 catches for a couple 100 yards this last year. I think that he's got more in the tank there, and it'll be interesting how they develop him. You know, same thing with Will Disley came in, and he really didn't have any development in college as a receiver. Surprised us a little bit with his athleticism right out of the gate.
The few times when in college, when Will Disley was used as a receiver, he looked like an offensive lineman trying to run. It looked really bad. And you know, he came out his rookie year before his season-ending injury and looked way smoother. It's like, how do you become a better athlete between college and the pros? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me, but somehow we did it. And and in this case, like, Barner, I think, is a smoother athlete than Disley ever was, but Disley is the better blocker of the two. So we'll see. I don't, like I said, I don't dislike the pick. I think you need inline blockers at tight end that can move guys, and Barner can. And that, to me, that's what that pick was about. So while I didn't like it the moment it came out, because I was like, oh, why wouldn't you draft Stover? I having gone back and looked at it, I like that pick now.
Okay, so here's another really, it starts to get a little question marky for me. Nehemiah Pritchett from Auburn, the cornerback, was selected here at 136 on the trade value pickup we got. Now, when you look at him just as a straight prospect, Keith, I'm fine with this and the value at this range. Because you take a look at big boards and so forth, he's kind of in this range. He might be a little earlier, not too much later than this. So he's valued right. But when you take a look at our combined cornerback room and you try to fit him in somewhere, I don't even know where he kind of fits in. And that's the issue that I have with the pick. It's like, if you're gonna go get a quarterback on a loaded room, you better have some special talents that others don't have. Now, I will say this. He's got 4.36 speed, and he can return kicks. So maybe that's where he finds his role on the team in 2024.
Yeah, actually, I was that I think is where he finds his kid. That's he was a really good college kick returner, and so that's a possibility. And I think he has a chance to, he's going to compete as a slot. He's
got a 149 10-yard split, Keith.
The guy's got speed. He's got speed for days. But his tape's not that. The speed doesn't jump out on his tape because he's bailing on routes early, pre-snap quite a bit, rather than staying up and jamming guys. And I know that can be coaching and not something he wants to do or whatever, but his tape's like, it's okay. It's not good. But you look at those physical numbers and you go, okay, this is a guy that certainly doesn't need to play this year because they're just so deep above him. Maybe they can develop him over the next year. And there's nothing wrong with that. So,
when you read his scouting report and the strengths, there's all these words that kind of pop out: fluid, speed, versatile, exemplary technique, outstanding football IQ, long arms, exceptional deep speed, proficiency, quick change, competitive nature. Sounds like a good football player to me. So I'm going to reserve my judgment on him, see where he kind of fits in the room, where they've got a plan, obviously, and I want to kind of figure that out for him. I really like the other cornerback we chose as well in the 6th round, but we'll get to him in a second. Sata Lumea from Utah, the tackle at Utah, who is a guard. Yeah, 6'4", 319 pounds, 4-year starter, 3-time All Pac-12 selection, experience at right tackle and left tackle, as well as 19 games at right guard. I like the pick, Keith, but it's an undeveloped kind of player a little bit. But I like the profile in general, the tenacity, the hard worker, all that, all the starts.
Yeah, he's got all the starts, and yet his technique is kind of crap. And he's a T-Rex as far as arm length. I think he's going to get overwhelmed in the pros.
He's got 19th percentile in his wingspan.
Yeah.
32 and 7/8 inch arms.
Honestly, I didn't
Which is a
have
center.
him.
Like he could maybe be a center.
Maybe.
Because his 40 was 5.252. I mean, he's kind of slow-footed and so forth. Very
honestly,
low.
I didn't think he was a draftable player.
Huh. Okay.
I mean, I don't draft offensive linemen who have T-Rex arms, and he does. And I honestly, I saw that pick and I'm like, wow, that you and I talked about how after, like when you get into round 6, the quality of player drops off really fast.
Yes.
And it's the guys are going to go early in round 6 that would be undrafted free agents in almost any other draft. And this was a perfect example. This was a guy that would have gone undrafted in almost any draft.
Okay. Immediately comes in and is in the bucket for the guard spot. We'll see if he makes the roster, if he's just kind of one of those guys that starts the year off on a practice squad. And,
he's got an uphill battle to make the roster.
I agree. It's a loaded roster right now. As far
his best bet right now will be to convert to center and beat out, the backup that they signed behind Oluwatimi. Yeah.
Interesting.
I think that's his clearest path to a roster spot.
So again, here's another cornerback at 6'1", 192 that I like as a player and wonder where he's going to end up making the roster and playing. So a cornerback, DJ James from Auburn. One can argue that he's the better of the two cornerbacks from Auburn. Emory Hunt, we're familiar with him. He's kind of an evaluator out there. And he's got him as the 4th ranked nickel cornerback in the draft class behind Nate Wiggins and Max Melton, believe it or not.
I mean, I like him as a nickel, and he has zero business being outside of that. Lance Zerling had him as a 3rd round grade. The problem I have with them is he's tiny. He's 175 pounds.
Yes. 6 foot, 175. Has 8 3/8 inch hands, 31 inch arms.
Yeah, this guy's
72 inch wingspan.
Yeah, he's not,
which is nothing really.
Yeah, he's not physical.
Ran a 4.4 240 though.
Yeah,
and a 1.50 split.
And and just his skill set projects as a nickel, but it projects as a pretty good cover nickel. Now, if you want a nickel that can come up and make plays in the running game and help out, that kind of stuff, I'm like, man, you're just going to get this kid hurt at 175 pounds. But if you need someone who can cover that 3rd receiver on the inside, James can do that. I think there's,
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, he's just such a unique player in that he's so small.
He's so small. You know what? Washington last year drafted, I think in the 1st round, a guy that was his size.
Yeah.
170 pounds. And I was like, what the hell? And then he basically didn't play last year, which kind of,
Emmanuel something. I can't remember his name.
So James might be in that where he just has a hard time staying healthy because of his size in the NFL. I mean, he's going to be going up against guys that outweigh him by 50 pounds. He's going to be tackling.
His pure coverage skills, his ball skills are top notch. Elite.
His mirroring ability, his short area quickness to stay in coverage and all of that, they really are really good. He's just tiny.
Right. So what do you do with a player like that? Where does he fit in this room?
Honestly, he fits in. Is he worse than Kobe Bryant?
Yeah, that's we don't know. I mean, Kobe's a real nice physical player. He just has the coverage skill issues that we've all seen.
He missed tackles like crazy last year. When
I will say this about DJ James, even though he's 175 pounds, he's a total willing physical player. Like he sticks his nose in, aggressive and scrappy. Really, yeah. I mean, I think people are going to like him. I just don't know if I mean,
you can do that.
The bottom line: if you can cover in the NFL and you got the speed and recovery speed and all that kind of stuff, and you're shifty, and he's got that. What did I say? 150 split.
Yeah.
If that comes out on the field, it's hard to keep a guy off a team that has those kind of skills.
It's easy to stick your head, your nose in things and make those kind of tackles when you're playing ACC level competition. Right? I mean, no guys at Duke are coming out there and being physically imposing.
I mean, Auburn's a good program.
Oh, I'm not talking about Auburn. I'm talking about the players that he's playing against.
So
the ACC is Florida State and Auburn and a bunch of basketball schools that play like their basketball schools.
So the last pick that Seattle had, they traded off of 235 and came up and swapped that pick with 207 overall. So 6th round, 207. Chose Michael Jarrell from Findlay, a tackle. And don't really know too much about him because he's almost undiscoverable.
He didn't come to the combine or any of that stuff.
Right. So they're seeing some upside. The guy's 6'4", 309, kind of a practice squad level kind of player, bottom of the roster, a guy that you develop over time, nowhere ready to go. By most accounts, he wasn't going to get drafted. So I'm just curious as to why they drafted the kid.
Yeah, I honestly, he is a massive project. He's got some physical tools, but he is a massive project. I don't see why you would move up off of a 7th round pick into the 6th round to draft a guy that I don't know if most teams even had on their draft board.
Yeah, non-draftable grade.
Which
isn't to say that it won't work out and he won't be a fine player someday. It's just exceedingly difficult coming from where he's coming from to do that. So
yeah, the other thing is that while the Seahawks listed him as a tackle on their draft card, every place I looked until after he was drafted,
I can't find an arm measurement on him.
Listed him as a guard.
Yeah, I can't find an arm measurement for him.
So that would mean that they tripled up at the guard position, and probably one of the 3 will make the roster.
Right.
That's to me just not a great use of draft capital.
Wasting picks. Yeah, and they didn't draft a running back. We needed a 3rd running back. I mean, you can take a look at the roster, and yeah, and we didn't draft a defensive end, like a base defensive end. And we didn't draft a edge rusher.
Well,
we didn't draft a safety.
I mean, your Murphy is a base defensive end in a 3-4 because he's a right, a 3-tech is a defensive end in a 3-4.
Yeah.
And so he can play 3 and the 5 and the nose. He's just so versatile.
Okay. You're right.
But they didn't draft an edge, a pass rusher, an edge rusher. But that was one of the few positions on this roster, other than cornerback, where they really had the bodies they needed. It would have been nice to get another one, but we'll see how the draft falls type of situation, and they're going to be fine.
Okay, so I'm going to go over some undrafted rookie free agents. You can stop me whenever you want, and we can talk about them. But one of the guys I want to talk about actually right away is tight end Jack Westover from Washington. University of Washington, 6'3", 244. Left Washington with a career 87 catches for 849 yards, 9.8 yards per catch, 6 touchdowns. They give him a $25,000 bonus. He's, again, a guy that's kind of a slot receiving tight end, not so much an inline blocker. I thought it's interesting that they bring him along. San Jose State quarterback Chevion Cordillero, 6 foot, 190 pounds. George Halani, the running back out of Boise State, 5'10", 208. He's got some nice attributes. It'd be interesting to see if he can stick on the roster, since there is kind of a fourth running back opportunity there. They also had a running back, Tamarick Williams, 6 foot, 227 pounds. Idaho wide receiver Hayden Hatton, which I like, 6'1", 209. Excellent hands. Like, seriously, one of the best hands in this draft class. Wasn't drafted. 244 receptions, 3,449 yards, 14.1 yards per reception with 33 TDs. I mean, talk about lighting it up.
In the era of the transfer portal, how did he stay at Idaho?
I know. That's an amazing stat line, really, for any wide receiver ever. Like, it's just, it's kind of crazy. They one of the things I want to talk to you about, and Brady Henderson reported on this, was that South Dakota State offensive tackle Garrett Greenfield, 6'5", 311 pounds, athletic and explosive, the good anchor. Brady Henderson reports that he got a $20,000 signing bonus and a fully guaranteed $195,000 salary, which is interesting to me, which is unheard of.
Yeah.
So that's a name to watch. We signed a center. One of the interesting names I saw was Houston defensive lineman, edge rusher Nelson Caesar, 6'2", 254. He kind of had a 6th, 7th round grade. Went undrafted. Is basically just a pass rush specialist, a guy that can kind of get to the quarterback and does really nothing else at this point. Went to the Senior Bowl. Got a nice profile. 103 tackles in his career, 28.5 tackles for loss, 18 sacks, 4 pass breakups, 2 forced fumbles, 2 block kicks, an interception, playing for Houston. So kind of an interesting name. I wanted to see if he can find a way to stick.
Guy that I'm really intrigued at the same position is the Grambling State player, Sundiata Anderson.
Yes, I was going to talk about him. Yep, and he's also got a $10,000 bonus and a $100,000 salary that is guaranteed, fully guaranteed. Yeah.
So when you start getting that's the kind of thing that, like, guys, they clearly had a draftable grade on the guy and think he's going to make the roster, or they wouldn't have. Nobody guarantees the salary of an undrafted free agent. But they did here. So they probably are like, okay, he's going to make the roster. I think if you're Levi Bell and you see that this guy got a $100,000 of his salary guaranteed, you go, right, crap, I'm not going to make the roster again.
Right. The other guy I thought was interesting was Ro Torrance, the Arizona State defensive back, 6'2", 208 pounds, really good length and size, speed kind of guy. I just think that I was interested in him.
I think he's moving to safety.
Okay. I was going to ask you if you knew.
I don't know. I have no insider information on that. I have not heard anything, but I always viewed him as a safety and not as a corner at the next level. And when they signed him, especially after drafting 2 cornerbacks.
He's so physical.
Yeah, I think he'll make a great safety, and I think they move him.
Interesting. See. Tagliavoa. Is that how you pronounce his name? The Maryland quarterback, 5'11", 200 pounds, invited to camp. Now, he doesn't have a contract, but he's invited. He's the brother of Tagliavoa, the quarterback for Miami, and he had a great career at Maryland. 67% completion, 11,256 yards, 76 touchdowns, 37 interceptions.
Yeah, but he makes Russell Wilson look tall.
5'11", 200 pounds. Yeah.
He is not 5'11".
We'll
if
see.
he's more than 5'9", I'll be surprised.
I had him actually. There was where did I see it? Let me see if I can find that really quick. I don't have it. I didn't look him up. Sorry. I thought I saw him at 5'11" and an eighth or something like that. So I think he is just a nudge over 5'11".
Okay.
But anyway, sure. There's some excitement. There's some buzz around this kid. There has been. He's kind of had that fringy draftable grade. Obviously, at that size, you're talking about a back end guy anyway. I'm not sure you can be successful, but he's toolsy. He's just small, and that's it. That's kind of the list. The roster's filled out. If you don't count the invite guys, we're sitting right at 90 players on the 90-man roster as we head into the off season, which is kind of right where you need to be. And they could sign some guys. They could release some guys. I mean, now that the roster is a little bit more malleable, flexible as time goes on here in the off season. But this is kind of it. This is where we're at. Just from a high viewpoint, look at our roster, Keith.
Of all these guys,
how do you feel
on the undrafted? Who's the one you're most excited to see in camp?
Yeah, well, that's a fun question because, as you know, there's certain positions that stand out in camp and certain positions that don't. So I'm looking at like a Roe Torrance just to see the body type and see where they play him. Maybe if we can get any information that comes out of camp for a guy like that. I agree with you on the Sundiata Anderson would be interesting because those guys can kind of show a little bit of speed in camp. Nelson Caesar, they're not going to be able to touch anybody or really, so they're just kind of going through the motions. I like that. Yeah. That's about it. George Holani, maybe.
How Aaron Beasley fits in.
Aaron Beasley.
Tennessee inside linebacker. I think he's got a chance to come in and make the roster and push like a guy like John Radigan off.
I don't even have Aaron Beasley on my list, and I've got a pretty decent list that goes way beyond what I talked about.
Oh, I've got my list. It came from something the Seahawks posted.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So, and maybe he's coming to camp and not that he's on the roster, but, I watched some Tennessee games as we were, scouting players, and he's a guy I noticed. He showed up. I wasn't tuning in to watch him, but I kept noticing him, and that's always a good sign. And so for him to have a chance to come in, like he's got to beat out either Radigan or O'Connell, and I don't think either one of those is going to be too hard to do. So I think he's got a chance.
I'm interested to see what Drake Thomas does this year at linebacker. He was kind of a draftable graded player in 2023 and ended up going undrafted, went over to the Raiders and then was cut. And then we picked him up out off the practice squad and carried him on our roster all year. Played quite a few different special team snaps. But I'd like to see what they do as far as developing him into a linebacker.
Yeah, he definitely is a guy that could, he doesn't count as part of this year's draft class, but in a way he kind of might because he doesn't really have any, he wasn't really part of any plans. He just became available and the Seahawks grabbed him. So.
Right. And now it's a new coaching staff and who knows, right? Yeah, I think overall, Keith, here's I guess the bottom line. Have we helped ourselves this offseason, or are we the same?
Oh, we're not the same. That's the key here is this is a team that is in transition. They have jettisoned a lot of marquee names with giant contracts and replaced them with guys, casual fans may not have ever heard of, with much smaller contracts. and done so in a way that allows them to get their spending priorities reestablished, clear a bunch of money after this year. They're a vastly different team. Are they better? I think so, but not significantly.
Marginally.
What?
Marginally, around the margins. Marginally.
Yeah. I think they're better, but not significantly better. But the key is that, gone are the two $18+ million safeties that were taking up space on the roster, and
they didn't make the mistake of signing the really expensive linebackers back, like Bobby Wagner and Brooks.
Mm-hmm. Yep. They found guys that were better in coverage, and they invested in the trenches, which they need to do.
I'm excited actually about that.
Signing and drafting a pair of defensive tackles that are going to be really fun to watch next to each other. And, basically putting a guy like Dre Jones on notice. Step up, or you may be gone.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, fun stuff. I don't know what's next. We haven't put together our schedule for the remaining off season yet, but if it's anything like it has been in the past, we'll continue to dig into the roster, look at some coaching and schematic things coming up, and just all things Seahawks. Maybe we can have some guests on this off season too, just kind of break it up a little bit. And good conversation, fun draft. I know it, especially day 3 just didn't go as well as you want. We didn't have a lot of draft capital. I think this showed me again, if I was looking for another reason to think that this is a 2 or 3 year project, this draft kind of showed that to me, that really we are a ways away. We just have too many holes that we were trying to fill and not enough draft capital to do it adequately. And so I think, we've got a decent team. I don't think we're a Super Bowl contender, but we're a team that is fringy playoff worthy, and should be a fun team to watch as the team transitions. Now, are we on the rise? That's going to be the question I think you have to answer this season. Are we a team that's ascending, or are we level, or are we descending? Like, this thing could fall apart too. We got a new coaching staff. Everybody's new. So things could go wonky, but if we are ascending, we should be able to see that in action this year. And I would love to figure that out. That's probably the number one question.
I don't know. There's so many guys on 1-year deals as they plug holes, waiting for those bad contracts to finally come off the books after this year. I don't think we will know, unless the rookies just, and the 2nd-year players and those guys just really step up, and you're like, wow, this team's got a really nice young core. And now they've got a ton of cap space to work with. I don't know if we'll know. And that's kind of unfortunate.
Yeah, I don't know if we have as much cap space as you think we do. I was going to see what our 2025 looks like really quick. Well, I got you.
I just know they have a ton of dead money. That is
so
on
in
the books
2025 we're projected to have $2,992,000. Not the 60 or 70 or 80. It's tied up now because we signed. Geno's still there. Draymond Jones' contract's still there. Now we're going to pay Leonard Williams. Leonard Williams' cap number next year is $29 million. Nwasu is $21,498,000.
Yeah, I mean, they've got guys.
So they have some big contract numbers next year.
True, but it's not the Diggs and Adams contracts that were just albatross like sinks.
Right. At least we're getting value for those contracts.
Yeah, we're actually getting something out of those. So, and they'll have time to work around all those things. But I just know they have so much dead money this year, and all that dead money is coming off the books.
Yes. And they can continue to do those things. Like, for example, if they decide to move on from Geno Smith next year, they can save $25 million against the cap. with $13 million in dead money, but nonetheless, total savings, $25 million. DK Metcalf next year becomes a little bit more manageable as far as tradable. If you were going to do that, you could save $22 million against the cap next year. Tyler Lockett, $17 million against the cap next year. Draymond Jones, $16 million savings. This year, he's kind of upside down. So there's a lot more roster flexibility next year with contracts as well, in addition to the dead money moving off. So that's good. Okay. Let's get out of here. Long weekend. It was good to get that out of the way. Now we can really know what we've got. We went through the process. Now we have the players. Now we can kind of build this roster and figure it out. Find out if we're going to be good, if we're not going to be good, if we're going to be different and better, or different and worse, all that kind of stuff. So you can find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. You can find me at NW Seahawk. The show is Seahawks Playbook Podcast on your favorite podcast platform and our YouTube channel, and hit the subscribe button when you find it. So until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.